Stop lying about 41. This is where Guderian really broke his teeth, and tanks near Smolensk. You think the Germans were stopped by Panfilov's men or the Siberian divisions near Moscow? No, it happened earlier. In the July dust near Mogilev, Guderian's tanks hit a wall for the first time. And that wall wasn't made of steel, it was made of people. If you're scrolling through your feed looking for honest history without slogans and polish, you've found what you need. Today, we're digging into the dirtiest, dustiest, and most terrifying truth of the summer of 1941. We're used to the pretty picture, stood to the death, not a step back, for the motherland. It's all true, but there's another truth. The smell of burning diesel, the screams of the wounded in blazing tanks, and the raw fury when you've got 3 rounds in your rifle and a steel box with a cross is charging at you. Heinz Guderian, Fast Heinz, a legend of the Wehrmacht, the father of armored warfare. By July 1941, he had cut through Europe like a knife through butter. His 2nd Panzer Group was covering up to 150 kilometers a day. That's faster than you drive to your dacha on the Moscow Ring Road. Back in Berlin, they were already sharpening their knives for the Moscow salad. Smolensk seemed like the last door before the Kremlin. But near Smolensk, something happened that shouldn't have been possible according to the laws of Blitzkrieg. The tanks stopped, and they were stopped by a handful of battered divisions that had no communication with Moscow, no proper maps, not even enough ammunition for everyone. Subscribe to the channel so you don't lose the thread. And in the comments, write Guderian or Smolensk. Which city should I cover next? Let's go. Prologue: Why the Germans were so confident. To understand the heroism, you have to understand the horror of the situation. Put yourself in the boots of a German tanker on July 12, 1941. Behind you is France, which surrendered in 6 weeks. Behind you is Poland, crushed to nothing. The Russians, according to rumors, are stupid and don't know how to fight. The Germans have radios in every tank. Their aircraft hover over the battlefield like birds of prey. Their armor is high quality, their guns accurate. And they were all taught one thing: you are the elite. The Russians will run. Guderian looks at the map. On July 10th, his units reached the Dnieper River. Smolensk is 100 to 150 kilometers away. That's 2 sprints. That's 2 days of driving if you keep your foot on the gas. Hitler is already moving figures around on his map at the Wolf's Lair headquarters. But in Guderian's path stands not even an army, a fragment, the 61st Rifle Corps. It had already been battered in the border battles. Worn down, bled white, having lost its commanders. Its corps was the 172nd Rifle Division. These weren't guardsmen. They were just men in tunics who had dug in around Mogilev. And this is where things get interesting. Chapter 1. German Overconfidence. July 12th. The Germans were tired of winning. That sounds strange, but it's true. The fatigue of success breeds arrogance. Guderian throws his 3rd Panzer Division into battle. The elite. And he orders, forward, the infantry will catch up. But the infantry doesn't catch up. They're bogged down somewhere in the rear. So 70 to 80 tanks without infantry support charge straight at the trenches of the 172nd Division. According to every Wehrmacht manual, this is a crime. Tanks without infantry are blind and deaf. Our infantry knew this. They let the enemy get within 20 to 30 meters. Do you know what a Molotov cocktail is against a tank? It's a lottery. You have to jump out of the trench, run up to the roaring machine, dodge the machine gun fire your neighbor is already cut down, and splash the burning fuel onto the engine louvers. The odds are 1 in 10. But when there are lots of tanks, odds turn into orders. German losses near Mogilev on July 12th are still disputed. German veterans later recalled, "It wasn't an attack. It was a slaughter. An entire company of the 3rd Panzer Division ceased to exist within an hour." Officer Horst Sobel, who fought there, would later write a bitter phrase in his memoirs: "The enemy turned out to be much stronger than expected." Notice, he didn't say they had more tanks. He said stronger, in spirit. And what do Soviet documents say at the same time? We open the combat log of the Western Front for July 12th. A dry, bureaucratic line. Enemy attacks were repelled by core units. That's it. Not a word about heroism. Not a word about 39 burned German tanks, according to our data. For the headquarters, it was just another day in hell. Repelled them, and that's that. Important aside, the economics of war. A German tank in 1941 wasn't just a piece of metal. It was 10 tons of steel, rubber, Zeiss optics, and a trained crew that had been prepared for 6 months. Losing 10 to 15 machines in a single attack was a local break in reality. Berlin wouldn't understand. Guderian would have to lie in his reports. Chapter 2. The Pressure of the Steamroller, July 13th to 15th. The Germans are pragmatists. They acknowledged the mistake and brought up the infantry. The next day, July 13th, another attack. The 61st Corps, under pressure from superior forces, is forced to withdraw. Retreating across open fields under German air superiority is a separate circle of hell. The Junkers come in waves, the ground shakes, and the sky is black with crosses. But even in retreat, the Corps doesn't disintegrate. That's the main indicator of military culture. Retreating in an organized fashion is harder than attacking. On July 14th, Guderian tries a new trick. An assault group, 30 tanks plus assault guns plus infantry riding on the armor. Their target, to break through the 160th Rifle Division. And what happens? The attack stalls. Again, our troops fought them off. How? They must have dug themselves into the earth up to their ears. Battalion commanders, left without communication with their regiments, must have made their own decisions. Fight as long as you have a bullet. No bullets, fight with your rifle butt. But on July 15th, chaos breaks out. The command of the 13th Army, which included the 61st Corps, issues an order, counterattack. Theoretically, it's correct. You have to hit the flank of the enemy who has broken through. Practically, it's insanity, because there is no communication with the army. The Soviet army in 1941 wasn't an army, it was a huge, fragmented mess. Radios were only at division headquarters, and they often broke down. Messengers were killed under bombardment. An order from the front commander to a battalion commander took 24 hours to travel, and in 24 hours the front line could shift by 10 kilometers. The result, instead of a unified strike, was local skirmishes. Some went on the attack, some never received the order, some were already surrounded. The Germans, seeing this lack of coordination, simply ground down the counterattacking forces piece by piece. Brutally, efficiently. And yet, the line didn't collapse. The Germans pushed, but they didn't break through. Chapter 3. The most important sign of failure, the infantry arrives. Now listen to the most telling fact, the one that proves the blitzkrieg near Smolensk had broken down. Guderian is forced to halt his motorized divisions, and he starts demanding reinforcements. What kind? Infantry. Ordinary, slow, footbound army corps. For those not in the know, blitzkrieg isn't about lots of tanks. It's about speed. Tanks have to race forward, encircling the enemy while he's still asleep. Your own infantry comes later, on the second day, to finish off the encircled troops. When tanks have to wait for infantry, speed drops to zero. The mechanism breaks. And so, at the end of July, 2 Army Corps of the Wehrmacht are brought up to Smolensk. Infantry, the slowpokes, they will storm the trenches, lose men, and be ground up in the meat grinder. This isn't a victory march. This is positional warfare. And positional warfare is death for Germany. They don't have the oil, the iron, the endless human resources. They planned for a blitzkrieg of 6 to 8 weeks. On the 9th week, Guderian is standing near Smolensk, scratching his head. Historical context from the internet and documents. German General Halder, chief of the General Staff, writes in his diary on July 25th a phrase that would later become famous. "The campaign in the East will not be won." Hear that? July 25th, and Moscow is still 400 kilometers away. He already understood that things were going bad. Because time was working for the Russians. Chapter 4: Why this isn't in the textbooks. You might ask, why haven't I heard about this? Why did they teach us about the Brest Fortress and Moscow in school, but about Mogilev and the 61st Corps silence? The answer is simple and bitter. Because this story isn't about victory. Smolensk fell on July 16th. The 13th Army was surrounded. Thousands of soldiers died or were captured. From a military science perspective, it's a defeat. But it's a defeat with a bitter aftertaste of steel. Guderian won the city, but he lost time. Precious weeks of July and August when his tanks could have been marching on Moscow. Instead, he got bogged down in positional battles. His tanks burned from bottles of gasoline. His elite crews died from the bullets of Red Army soldiers who didn't even have proper grenades. It was this delay that allowed Stalin to transfer divisions from the Far East to Moscow, the Siberians in white camouflage suits. Build defenses near Vyazma and Mozhaysk. Even if they weren't finished, something was done. Evacuate factories to the Urals. While Guderian was stuck, the trains carrying equipment got through. If Guderian hadn't met the 61st Rifle Corps near Mogilev, he would have been at Moscow at the end of July. Moscow empty, without reserves, without fortifications. The outcome of the war could have been different. That's no exaggeration. Epilogue: Man versus Machine. I've read dozens of memoirs and documents preparing this text. And one detail personally got to me. In the combat log of the Western Front, where it says enemy attacks were repelled, there are no names, no héroes, no awards. We don't know who knocked out that first German tank on July 12th. We don't know the name of the lieutenant who organized the defense when communication with the regiment was lost. We don't know how many of them died there. But I know something else. Those men, without communication, without tanks, without proper air support, did the impossible. They made Fast Heinz slow down. They wrote themselves into history with their blood, not with ink. And here I am now, sitting in a warm apartment, drinking tea, typing this text on a laptop. And they were 19 or 20 years old. They lay in the damp earth, artillery pounded them, and they didn't retreat, because behind them was Moscow. What's next? Want to know how Guderian tried to take revenge near Tula in October 41? Or how our tank crews chased the Germans with their KVs near Leningrad? Write in the comments. It's important for me to know you're reading this. If you found it interesting, a like costs you nothing and makes me happy. Subscribe to the channel. Here, we break down the war without embellishment. With swearing, sweat, and blood, but with respect for the feat. See you in the next stories. We remember, we are proud, and most importantly, we know how it really happened.